When we think about establishing a character at the start of a film, we probably first think about what we can learn through dialogue, exposition, or performance. But The Graduate uses cinematography to help us understand the main character's mental state. Here, Benjamin is framed as if he's underwater, and pressing in from the outside, visually confining him, are his parents.
Is anything wrong?
No.
After this shot, we cut directly to Ben's graduation party, and we never get an establishing wide shot of the party. Instead, we just see a long telephoto shot that tracks with Ben as adults from the party push into the frame from every side. In just a few seconds, we can already understand and feel the pressure Ben is under. He tries to escape, but is literally, thematically, and visually trapped by the adults around him. That feeling is key to the rest of the plot, and here the cinematography is playing a major role in establishing the film's thematic foundation. And look at how this adult, Mrs. Robinson, is positioned in contrast to every other adult in the scene. If you haven't seen The Graduate and you want to know why she's portrayed differently, you'll have to watch it to find out. That's an example of how composition, just one element of the art of cinematography, can be used to help tell a story. And this, for me, is a big part of what defines great cinematography: the ability to use the elements of cinematography as storytelling tools. If you can do that while making beautiful images in a way that gives a film a cohesive and consistent visual style, then you have incredible cinematography. And if you can do those things while innovatively pushing the boundaries and creating cinematography that feels unique and fresh, that is where you find the greatest cinematography of all time. At least, that's what I look for in cinematography. At the end of the day, what cinematography is the greatest is an almost impossible question to answer. We can talk about how influential a certain film's cinematography was, or which cinematographers have won the most Oscars, but for each viewer, the greatest cinematography will be the images that help a particular story dig itself into your heart and psyche. And that's something that's very personal and depends on your aesthetic preferences and which stories resonate the most with you. It can also sometimes be hard to understand exactly where cinematography ends and the other crafts of filmmaking begin. For an image like this, how much of the beauty and visual interest comes from the cinematography, and how much is the result of the location or production design? While obviously there is a role on set called the director of photography or cinematographer, there are many people who contribute to the cinematography of a film. What a shot looks like at the end of the day is often a collaboration between the director, cinematographer, their crew, the production designers, colorists, and VFX artists. You might have a cinematographer like Roger Deakins collaborating with set designers to help plan how to build lighting into the set design. Or you might have a dolly grip like Sanjay Samy who builds custom dolly rigs so that Wes Anderson can pull off some of his complicated camera moves. Some directors meticulously plan every composition or camera move, and some cinematographers improvise handheld movement and compositions while they shoot. So while I'll mention the work of specific directors and cinematographers in this video, the assumption here is always that the final images are often the collaborative effort of many people and departments working on a film. With all this in mind, I'm going to take you on a tour of what has been the greatest cinematography I've seen so far in my years of watching movies. This certainly isn't a comprehensive list for me, but I'll touch on as many examples as I can. Maybe you'll agree with some of my choices, but if you don't, I hope this video still helps clarify what great cinematography means for you and the important role cinematography can play in some of your favorite films. This video is sponsored by Mubi. Go to mubi.com/ThomasFlight to sign up for your free trial today. When I think about great cinematography, The Tree of Life is the first movie that comes to my mind. Not necessarily because it's the best, although I think it is one of the most beautiful movies ever shot, but because it was part of what made me realize when I was younger that you could shoot a movie in a way that felt radically different from how most movies are shot. The lens was wide, the camera was handheld and always moving, and that movement felt like an eye that was searching for something. Shots were positioned from low angles, everything was in focus, and the light was always beautiful. Beyond that, though, it never felt artificial or forced. It didn't feel like a constructed beauty. It felt like the beauty of found sunlight. To talk about Tree of Life, we have to talk about one of the best and most influential cinematographers of the 21st century, Emanuel Lubezki. Taken as a whole, Lubezki's filmography is jaw-droppingly impressive. Besides Tree of Life, The Revenant, Birdman, and Children of Men are some of the most beautifully shot movies I've ever seen, and that's just to name a few. Lubezki is a master of using wide lenses, a roving camera, and long takes that build suspense without feeling gimmicky. If some of these things that I've mentioned don't seem that innovative now, it's only because Lubezki's work has probably been the biggest influence on cinematography of the last few decades. Turn on a TV and you'll find everything from Netflix dramas to pharmaceutical commercials that have been influenced by his style. But to me, it seems like few attempts to imitate his look even come close to the heights he's reached, and I think there are several reasons for that. First, unlike a lot of handheld and Steadicam work that we see, Lubezki doesn't allow the composition of the image to be sacrificed when he's working this way, especially in longer takes. Without the precision of a dolly or tripod, handheld work I find can often become a jumbled mess or play it overly safe compositionally. Lubezki, however, is a master of finding interesting and layered compositions even within the chaos of a long handheld or Steadicam shot. It's for me what sets a piece like this extended take in Children of Men apart from the many long takes that have tried to follow in its footsteps. After a shaky dash across a road, look how his camera work deftly lands on this nicely composed shot. This isn't a fluke. He does this again and again within this 6-minute take. And his camera work always feels like it's aware and responsive of what the movement and position of the camera mean. In this shot, it's Lubezki's camera that pans down from Jessica Chastain's face, making the subject of the shot not her face, but this small piece of performance where she pinches at her neck in grief. But there's another thing that I think sets Lubezki's work apart, and that is his mastery of natural light. Natural lighting is deceptively difficult. In one sense, you're just shooting what's already there instead of setting up a bunch of lights. But you can't just walk outside anytime, anywhere, and shoot an image that looks this good. Here, he finds the position within the backyard where a small patch of sunlight streams through the trees and reflects off the baby's blanket, filling in the shadows on the older child's face and creating a catchlight in his eyes. Shooting with natural light is about being at the right place at the right time. It's about knowing how the light will look within a room at certain times of day. It requires an eye for where to place your subject. It requires coordination with the set and location departments and the entire production to do work when and where the light will be best and available. It requires patience to wait for the light to be right, and then a crew that can work quickly, since sunlight, when it's low in the sky, is always moving and changing, and during golden hour, dusk, or sunset when the light looks the best, you might have less than an hour to shoot entire scenes. For Lubezki and Malick in The Tree of Life, this meant shooting on multiple sets for the primary house just so that the sunlight was positioned where they wanted it indoors at certain times of day. Look, I'm not a natural light purist. I think more stylized and theatrical lighting can certainly be equally impressive, beautiful, and has a special power to tell certain kinds of stories. But there's a unique quality and beauty to natural light that is impossible to create artificially, and there are certain stories that I think are elevated by that naturalistic beauty in a way that I don't think artificial or theatrical lighting would. I specifically highlight Lubezki's work with Malick in Tree of Life, in part because Malick was an influential source in helping to develop and push Lubezki's style as far as it could go, and vice versa. Even though Malick and Lubezki have gone on to do beautiful work apart from each other, the styles they both continue to use separately are undeniably linked. They don't just shoot films in a unique way, they developed an approach, style, and ethos for cinematography that they and other filmmakers have adopted and carried forward. Even before his work with Lubezki, Malick was always on the search for interesting ways to use natural light. Days of Heaven is another one of the most beautiful films I've ever seen. Here we don't yet see Malick's energetic, probing camera movement that he would develop with Lubezki, but we still see a focus on shooting in golden hour and with beautiful natural light. The cinematographer responsible for Days of Heaven, Nestor Almendros, is one of the great masters of realism and naturalism in lighting. Besides Days of Heaven, it's kind of rare that Almendros' work comes up in discussions of best cinematographers. And that's in part because I think his entire ethos centered around a certain kind of invisibility when it came to his use of lighting. Realism in lighting is something that, like using natural light, looks easier than it is. In a way, that's the point. It's supposed to look like the shot wasn't lit. But if you've ever tried to just shoot a scene in your own living room, you know that things don't automatically look this good. Almendros' lighting is never flashy, but it's always subtly beautiful. It's even and soft, the shadows are rich, there's enough contrast, but things never feel too dark or washed out. These are images that don't pop out at us and immediately grab our attention, but when I compare this cinematography to the sea of often too muddy, flat, or dark cinematography that is common now, it's this type of reliably solid, attractive, and realistic lighting that I've come to really appreciate. There's something very satisfying to me about a cinematographer like Almendros who just knows how to choose a film stock, lenses, and light in a way that produces warm, stunning images. Cinematographers like Lubezki and Deakins have shown you can shoot incredible cinematography on digital cameras, and I'm not a film purist, but when film is at its best, it produces a look that I love and which isn't really achievable any other way. I won't spend too much time here, but some of my favorite examples of this are Mihai Malaimer Jr.'s work with Paul Thomas Anderson on The Master, as well as Hoyte van Hoytema's work with Nolan, especially in Dunkirk and Interstellar. This kind of work feels to me like a continuation of the kind of realism in lighting that cinematographers like Almendros pushed forward. The other name that inevitably comes to mind when I think of cinematographers whose work has defined the 21st century is Roger Deakins. On one end of the spectrum, we can find work from Deakins that fits into the kind of naturalism we've been talking about. In The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, Deakins uses vintage lenses and grainier film stocks to perfectly capture the film's portrayal of the death of the Western myth. This film has some of the best nighttime cinematography I've ever seen and introduces us to Deakins' unparalleled use of light in motion. If Lubezki is the master of finding natural light, Deakins might be the contemporary cinematographer who is best at crafting beautiful light. Deakins' style is grounded in naturalism in that he goes to great lengths to make his lighting feel motivated, which means he makes it feel like every light actually has a source within the world. And the magic of Deakins' lighting for me is that he doesn't let this limit him. He uses motivated lighting and then pushes that to evocative and expressionistic extremes. This means when he approaches a film like Blade Runner 2049 or 1917, he isn't just coming into an existing space and setting up his lights, he's working collaboratively with the production and art design to design how the space will be lit. This allows him to use the movement of light in a way I've never seen from anyone else. Creatively, he pushes the limits of how you can light a scene, all while doing it beautifully with a keen eye for the shape and color of his light. Deakins and Lubezki in many ways defined the look of this recent era of contemporary filmmaking, but while a lot of my favorite cinematography is rooted in realism and naturalism in lighting, those things aren't inherently the best approach to shooting a film, and sometimes pushing something to visually unnatural extremes creates the image that will tell your story the best. Among the filmmakers who are more expressionistic when it comes to lighting, Nicholas Winding Refn is the first who comes to mind. His work with Larry Smith for Only God Forgives or with Natasha Brer for Neon Demon push the limits of what's possible with deeply saturated color in film. I also love the more expressionistic lighting that we find in neo-noir films like Seven or Blood Simple. These films update and exaggerate the visual drama of classic noirs like The Third Man and Touch of Evil and add color into the mix, creating a result that is arresting and stunning. Some of the best examples of more theatrical and expressionistic lighting are probably found in the past, where naturalism was less in favor. Classic films like Powell and Pressburger's The Red Shoes or Black Narcissus, for me, represent the height of what was possible visually in the studio era. We've talked a lot about light, but I want to shift here into talking about an equally important aspect of creating beautiful cinematography, one that I think is often overlooked, and that is composition and framing. The standard coverage approach to cinematography of wide establishing shots, over-the-shoulder mediums, and close-ups works well enough, and there's something to be said for the way this approach doesn't draw attention to itself. It can allow the cinematography to just disappear and for performance to take the center stage. But so much more than this is possible, and especially when you watch a lot of movies, unique compositions can be a breath of fresh air. And as we saw with The Graduate in the opening of this video, it can also be a powerful storytelling device. Beautiful composition can come from symmetry or breaking symmetry. It can come from the use of negative space, the balance of objects within an image. It can come from the way lines lead our eyes toward a subject. It can come from how an image is flattened or how depth is used to create layers. It can come from how elements of the world create frames within frames. And it can come from where the horizon line is placed within a shot. One of the first films I think of when we talk about composition is Barry Lyndon. There's a lot to love about how this movie is shot. The beautiful natural lighting with Stanley Kubrick and cinematographer John Alcott creating custom lenses so that they could shoot by candlelight. But the star of the show for me is really the way these shots are staged and composed to look like oil paintings. This is one of the few movies where you could genuinely say every frame is a painting. The lack of camera movement for a lot of the shots and the lack of movement within the frame only amplifies the effect. And the choice to use zooms instead of dollies flattens the image. It's as if we're slowly moving our eye towards or away from a painting instead of moving our body through the actual three-dimensional scene itself. Another director who is masterful at composing and blocking beautiful images is Akira Kurosawa. What is striking to me about the beauty of Seven Samurai is that Kurosawa isn't precious about the beauty of his shots. Sometimes you can feel a filmmaker slowing down to deliver their beautiful shot on a platter before they move on to the rest of the scene that is shot fairly normally. But with Kurosawa, we find an incredible attention to detail in staging, even for shots that only last a brief moment. Kurosawa finds beauty in how we layer bodies and movement within the frame. Yasujiro Ozu finds beauty in precise consistency, always shooting on the same lens and from specific preset camera heights for each type of shot. He's a clear predecessor to the calculated symmetry that Wes Anderson's cinematography is so often praised for. Composition, of course, isn't just about crafting beautiful images. What we're shown in the background of a shot and how it's shown can play a role in the thematic language of the film. When I watch Wim Wenders' Paris, Texas, beautifully shot by Robbie Mueller, I see a man who is trapped and assaulted by a modern world that he's struggling to be a part of. La Ventura, photographed by Aldo Scavarda, is another movie that uses composition to a similar end. Scavarda and director Michelangelo Antonioni make us feel as if his characters are lost or trapped within an empty landscape. He makes a town feel hollow and lifeless, like an austere box rather than a place built for humans. All of this a reflection of the emotional journey the characters are on. And in Francis Ford Coppola's The Conversation, shot mostly by Bill Butler, I can see and feel the character's paranoia and isolation in the way he's framed and shot within the film. Persona, directed by Ingmar Bergman and shot by Sven Nykvist, besides being stunningly beautiful, also uses composition to help tell its story of entangled identities. the women literally overlap on screen even as their identities intertwine within the story. Closely related to the language of composition for me is the language of camera movement. Movement evolves a shot. It can create a sense of mystery or discovery through slow revelation. It can help draw or guide our eye towards a subject, but it can also speak a deeper, more mysterious language. For Scorsese, whose movies vary greatly when it comes to lighting and color grade, there's a consistent beauty in his cinematography in how and when he moves his camera. For example, I often think about this shot from Taxi Driver, shot by Michael Chapman. The way the camera dollies into the hall before the phone conversation is over speaks deeply to something about what the character is experiencing. It's not just the emptiness of the hall, it's as if he's begun to dissociate or has already moved on. Michelangelo Antonioni in La Ventura creates a similar feeling here by doing the same thing, basically in reverse, panning into an empty frame long before the subject enters it. I can't tell you exactly what this means or why, but I don't think I need to, and I don't think the artist does either. That's part of the magic of how these images work. It's an intuitive visual poetry. I think why, when, and how a camera moves can carry just as much meaning as the rhythm or rhyme within a poem or song. And sometimes the camera can speak in the tiniest of ways. Cameras rack focus countless times within a film, shifting from one subject to another like we see in this shot from the conversation. Usually here the goal is to be invisible with this shift. Well, what about this moment in The Graduate where there's a shocking revelation for this character? Here director Mike Nichols and cinematographer Robert Surtees choose to slow down the shift in focus. It's almost as if we can see the realization of what's happening slowly dawning on the character. Great cinematography is about more than just a beautiful image, and I've talked about some of those other factors. But for me, the greatest cinematography is often very beautiful. Beauty alone isn't everything. There are plenty of beautiful films that at the end of the day don't have very much substance, and some of my favorite movies aren't the most beautifully shot films ever made. But I don't think we should toss aside beauty and cinematography as something that is merely a superficial stylistic addition. It can and does serve a greater purpose within the art of cinema. I think beauty can touch something very tender in us. It's hard to be cynical when you're looking at something beautiful. When you take in the beauty of a work of art, you kind of have to open yourself up a little bit to the mysterious, unspoken things that it has to say. Art can use this openness then to invite the viewer into an encounter with more difficult emotions. Melancholy, fear, loneliness, and grief are all things that we can find within a beautiful image. Seeing these uncomfortable emotions presented in a beautiful way might shed new light on how we perceive these things within our own life. It might open us personally to the possibility of holding our own sadness or grief within the beauty of gratitude for life. Cinematography is a bit like architecture, I think. You can design and build a building that does the bare minimum to serve the function that it needs to serve. But isn't it much more inviting? And doesn't it serve us as humans to create spaces that fulfill their purpose and are beautiful and communicate meaning and are pleasant to spend time inside? A film, I think, is the same way. Why not make dramatically lit images that catch and guide our attention? Why not use compositions that command the attention of our eye and cause us to look closer? Cinematography can create mystery and emotion. It can reveal the world to us in a new way. Sometimes the mystery of the image is inseparable from the poetry of the story itself. I feel this way watching movies like Tarkovsky's Mirror, shot by Gregory Rurberg. For me, the ethereal quality of these images visually cannot be untangled from what they mean and make me feel. When you see the beauty of a well-shot film, it's not just the beauty of the film, but a reflection of the beauty of our own world. I will always remember the chills I got when it first cuts to the desert in Lawrence of Arabia. But am I getting chills here because of the beauty of the cinematography or because of the beauty of the desert itself? Up on a massive cinema screen, the desert seems to almost swallow you. This, of course, helps tell the story, but it also offered me a deeper appreciation for the beauty of the deserts of Jordan, something I will likely never get to see in real life. And though they're constructed, I felt a similar way about the images of space in Interstellar. To craft beautiful images, the cinematographer might use the beauty of nature like this, or they might rely on the beauty of a human face or the beauty of light. And these images can tell us how to look for existing beauty in nature, faces, and light in the world around us. The cinematographer, by looking for beauty and capturing that beauty, is subtly teaching us how to find that beauty for ourselves. They are inviting us into their eyes. But perhaps the beauty in their images isn't found, but constructed. Here we can appreciate their artistic ability to arrange light, people, objects, and movement in unique and novel ways. All the potential magic of a photograph or a painting lie within a single frame of a film. There's a whole fine art form hidden within what is often treated as a mostly commercial and pop culture enterprise. How does this artistry work? What is this magic? Why do some images grab us while others are forgettable? Like an evocative story, I think an evocative image often contains some element of contrast or conflict, something that is slowly being revealed or something hidden that we want to see. Shadows are dramatic. We want to know what lies in them. We might see a character trying to conceal themselves, or maybe we're drawn in by the conflict between the beauty of the image and the sadness it contains. Cinematography was the first part of filmmaking I fell in love with. Before I started editing professionally, I loved photography and cinematography. And I will always love a beautifully shot film, and I hope you enjoyed a tour of some of my favorites. If you're interested in my breakdown of great cinematography that's more subtle and invisible in its approach, I recommend checking out my previous essay in praise of subtle cinematography, which I'll link to at the end here. But I also invite you to share your favorites in the comments below. What's the most beautiful film you've ever seen, and what did that beauty mean to you? This video is sponsored by Mubi, an online hand-curated streaming cinema where you can find plenty of movies with incredible cinematography. Right now in the US, you could watch more of Terrence Malick's incredible nature cinematography in The Voyage of Time. You could watch Park Chan-wook's inventive cinematography in Decision to Leave. He puts the camera in places and moves it in ways I never thought was possible. You could also check out The Substance from Coraline Farja. She uses the distortion of wide-angle lenses to powerful effect in this. Check those out and explore the rest of the library for free with your extended trial at mubi.com/ThomasFlight. Just click the link in the description below or go to mubi.com/ThomasFlight to sign up for your free trial today. Start exploring the incredible world of indie, festival, and international cinema right now at mubi.com/ThomasFlight. Thanks again to Mubi for sponsoring this video.